Can you keep it together over a whole lap? That's what we're finding out right now. In the heart of Belgium, the Prodigy Racing Association Elite Series will be doing 30 laps at Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps, and inclement weather is on the way. Let's be honest, it's not Spa without rain, and lots of it. But before the wet, we're in the dry, with excellent conditions for qualifying. Here's how it works. Our drivers will be split into two lobbies where they each have 10 minutes to set their fastest laps. From those two lobbies, the fastest 4 drivers for each manufacturer, Toyota, Ford, and Chevy, will book their tickets to the feature race. The final 2 slots will be filled by the fastest remaining qualifiers. Find the limit and ride it. This is qualifying at Spa. There is one thing that is for absolute sure tonight, and that is that anyone joining us is in for a treat. It's always a treat around Spa, but tonight, with rain on the way, we're going to see tire strategy deviation, fuel saving deviation, and they'll need one eye to keep on the road as well. And so I think that we're really going to be in for something special here. This is the Elite Series of Prodigy Racing Association, the fastest drivers in Gran Turismo 7. Make sure that if you are joining us tonight, you do punch that like button. You do hit the subscribe button to the channel as well. This is the 3rd night of racing this week. We started with the Sportsman Series at Tsukuba before the Challenger Series last night here at Spa, and we round out the week with the Elite Series, doing 30 laps at Spa. And Hoodcat, who was last week's winner at Watkins Glen, currently on provisional pole as we watch Siraxu head into the final part of the lap. That's through La Fagna and then headed down into Campus Stavolo before making that final run, that very, very fast left in Blanchimont. And I think that may have just been an off from the driver behind Siraxu. It was. And Millie X2 found the barrier. But here's our provisional pole sitter, a comfortable margin over JSM Turismo, who got second last week at Watkins Glen. And let's go with Hoodcat. Oh, and Hoodcat backs out of that chicane and has slowed to a crawl. Not sure if he's setting up a fast lap. I wouldn't expect so if he's going this deep into it, but let's go on board instead. Looks like Uncle Bobby is setting a fast lap. Let's go through it. So you start Eau Rouge with that left, the hard right as you load the front left tire up through Radion. And then you're down the Kemmel Straight all the way down. This is a long, long straight where you end up setting your car up to the left side of the track. As you head into Les Combes, you'll pick your braking point right at the start of the curb. Turn the car in, drop into 3rd gear as you get it rotated. Use those curbs on the left to rotate the car a little bit more. And then you're headed down into the downhill braking zone at Rivage. This is a corner that lasts anywhere from 6 to 7 years. It just never feels like the exit arrives, but you get back on the power before you see the exit of the corner. And then you're down through Speaker's Corner and setting up into the deliciously fast Pouillon. It's not going to be taken flat tonight, but you'll tap the brakes a little bit to load that outside right. Oh, and Uncle Bobby rolls off the track. That'll be no good for this lap. But behind him still is Gypsy 909, headed into La Fagna. You hit this right turn, and then it's a left corner, just clipping that inside curb. He's looking to improve on his 5th place position right here. Headed into campus, and then it'll be Stavilo, this very fast. This is a flat right-hander in the dry, and then it's running all the way down to a very rapid left-hander at Blanchiment. Uncle Bobby, I would expect to be out of the way or off the racing line. He does give space to Gypsy, but that compromise, it's still compromised his entry into Blanchiment. That will not help. None of this will help. Yep. That's a very difficult end to the qualifying session for both of those two drivers. So we'll have to see where this shakes out for them. Unable to improve on their previous times. There is one more week left in the season for Prodigy Racing Association in those 3 categories that I spoke of earlier, the Sportsman Series, the Challenger Series, and the Elite Series. The Sportsman Series will finish out with 100 laps at Northern Isle Speedway before the Challenger and Elite Series both go to Grand Valley Highway for 25 and 35 laps in those races, respectively. I would really advise that you do tune in for those. We've seen such a high caliber of racing across all 3 categories. Very compelling stuff at Tsukuba on Tuesday. I was part of the Challenger Series last night. The rain is quite a nasty proposition around Spa. I'm looking forward to seeing how the Elite Series handle it tonight. So we're currently waiting for the grid to be compiled, taking the 4 fastest drivers for each of the 3 manufacturers, Toyota, Chevy, and Ford. They make up 12 of the 14 available spots in the feature race, and the final 2 will be taken from the remaining fastest 2 finishers from these 2 qualifying lobbies, of which we saw qualifying lobby A. So there's a qualifying lobby B, and from there we'll compile the starting grid for the feature race tonight. And while it's always great to visit Spa, having weather mixed in does really heighten the experience. Certainly, I can speak to it as a driver, but I suspect for viewers as well. There will be strategy deviation. There was plenty last night in the Challenger Series with everyone starting on softs, but coming off of those softs to go onto wets based on what the weather was doing. And it is one thing entirely to be fast around a circuit. It's another thing entirely to be fast around a circuit while watching a weather radar, and then making the correct calls for which tire to be on based on what sort of surface water there was on the track. It really asks quite a bit of the drivers, and I think you'll see that here tonight. With a race stretching 30 laps, will drivers elect to spend a long time on inners and try to eke it out as far as they can go, or as soon as there's a dry line, do you switch to softs? Do you get the new boots on and be very, very careful not to go offline? Going offline in the sorts of conditions that the radar looks like we'll be facing tonight is disaster on slicks. That car goes in one direction and it's straight. So as we wait for the race lobby to be created, filled out, and the grid set to get us started, one of the dynamics to really keep an eye on is how much the driving style of these drivers is going to change as you move through the different weather that we're expecting to see tonight. On one hand, I haven't come across too many drivers who specifically practice in wet conditions. Typically, you practice in dry conditions, you scope out your braking points, and then based on how the conditions change, you will adapt those braking points, the turn-in points, how aggressive you are on your turn-in to account for surface water. What that means at Spa, where there are a couple extremely high-speed corners in the dry, is that as you approach them, you do have to make a decision pretty quickly about how you're going to approach that corner. Are you going to try it flat? Because if you're trying it flat and the drivers around you are not trying it flat and you somehow make it work, there's a lot of time to be gained there. I'm thinking specifically about Eau Rouge, Radillon, Blanchimont, Pouillon, though it's not quite as fast as you may see in, say, a Formula One game, Formula One race. But there's so much risk in those corners as you move into inclement conditions that it is a constant balance between that risk and that reward. While that is a somewhat common thing in racing, that is the point of finding the limit, it's magnified, it's amplified to a huge extent in wet weather. And what we'll see tonight is I'm expecting some very good, very consistent decision making about how to approach those corners. Now, there may also be absolute disaster. It is rainy at Spa, and typically that leads to some interesting results, and so I would expect some offs. I would expect some cars to meet the barrier, to spend perhaps a little more time than they would prefer in the gravel. But with track limit penalties activated here, to go off the track and gain an advantage, you're going to see that punished on the straight leading into Blanchimont and then ultimately the bus stop chicane. On the topic of the bus stop chicane, it got its name as a result of there actually being a bus stop. When the circuit was first built in the early 1900s, it was part of public roads, and there was actually a bus stop, and that's how it got its name. And so I would, there are several bus stops in global motorsports. This one, very literally, was a bus stop. And so as you want to impress someone, I don't know who'd be impressed by that, but should they be, that's a free tip that you wouldn't have had you not tuned in to Prodigy Racing Association Elite Series on a currently sunny Thursday in Belgium that I suspect will cloud over and bring some rain. Maybe, I'm not sure how many laps into the race it's expected, but it'll be interesting when it happens, and you'll be here to experience it. So, as I said during the qualifying session, if you're late joining the stream, you haven't missed anything except qualifying. Please do like this video and also subscribe to the channel. It helps the Racing Association grow and ultimately reach more people, find more racers, and all in all, produce a really good product. So if we work through the starting lineup, the first two drivers from the qualifying session that we were paying attention to are the overall first and second places. Hoodcat takes pole. Hoodcat won last week at Watkins Glen, and so that is continuing a nice little run of form there. JSM Turismo running Chevy Power in second, KTB running Toyota Power, AY running Toyota Power make up the second row in third and fourth. Then it's M. Schwartz in the Chevrolet, King Saturn in Ford, Siraxu in seventh in a Ford, Diff in eighth in a Toyota, I Am Lost next to him in ninth in the Toyota. And then Gypsy running 10th in a Ford, Vinnie Vinegars, who won at Daytona and sat on pole last week at Watkins Glen in 11th, Millie X2 in 12th running Chevy Power, Captain Napkins in 13th on Toyota Power, and Uncle Bobby made it through in 14th running Chevy Power. The overall pole time was a 2:26.774. A very nice drive to stick it on pole there from Hoodcat. So as the grid is being set up for us to get started here, let's go over the start procedures. So we'll start from the line. It'll be Vinnie Vinegars. We'll be nice and we'll call that just heating up the softs and getting them into the operating window. So yeah, the starting procedure. The cars will be formed up on the grid, and they'll do one lap, a formation lap, at around about 60 miles an hour to get squared away into their grid positions. And then the start of the race will be on the start-finish line, not on the run down to Eau Rouge and Raidillon, as is typically done for the 24-hour layout of Spa, which we are racing tonight, so that pit lane is very long. But we'll be starting just after the bus stop chicane on the run down to turn 1, which is La Source. Should a caution be thrown tonight, there is no race back to the start-finish line. That is the typical way that drivers will react to a caution in Prodigy Racing Association. But tonight it will be an immediate freezing of race position and reforming the start around the track back to the start-finish line. While we wait, let's follow Vinny Vinegar's for a lap around Spa. That's turn 1, La Source, and this is the run down to one of the most famous corners and corner sequences in the world, Eau Rouge and Raidillon. So we'll set the car up to the right side of the track, clip that apex. This is Raidillon up the hill, and that deposits you out onto the Kemmel Straight. Raidillon, the elevation change there is 35 meters. 35 meters in vertical change up that hill. Down the Kemmel Straight into Les Combes, you pick your braking point right there at the beginning of those curves, get the car to rotate in, you pass a stranded Soraxu on the right, and then you're down into Malmedy, clip the inside apex there, and set yourself up to the left side of the track for the corner that lasts forever in Ravage. You get back on the power before you see the corner exit, let the car drift wide before getting it over to the right side of the track and throwing it into the left at Jackie X. And then it's the run down to Pouillon. So have a braking point just after that 50-meter board as you load the front right tire to give you the grip as you come through both parts of Pouillon, sometimes referred to as double gauche. And then you run into Les Fagnes. There are numerous parts around this lap where the corner sequences feed directly into each other, where to mess up one, to be offline for one, will ruin at least another one, sometimes two. And that's Campus Corner there, and then Stavelot is flat in dry conditions. You want to take a little bit of that red and yellow inside curb and get a nice clean exit out onto this back straight as you approach Blanchiment. Blanchiment, you want to hang your car out, some wheels on the green there to flatten out the corner. You can take that one easy, flat in the dry, only accounting for your turn-in point. As your tires wear a little bit, you'll adjust that. We've gone a little deep there, far too deep into the bus stop chicane. But that rounds out the lap for Vinny Vinegar's. And on race pace, a 2:29 is going to be a couple seconds off the pole lap, but in terms of race pace, that's not bad if you can do that consistently over the course of a night. And that looked a little bit like contact there, which is unnecessary at this stage. But this really is, the corner we're approaching here, Blanchimont, is one of the treats on the calendar. It's one of the treats on any, that's unfortunate, one of the treats on any circuit in global motorsport. It is unbelievably fast. It's an unrelenting corner, and it requires total commitment if you're going to have any chance of making that work. And the grid has been formed, and we are all set to begin our formation lap. It is iconic in global motorsport, a glimmering jewel etched into the middle of the Ardennes forest with 19 corners stretching out over 7.004 kilometers. It is fast, it is physical, it is exhausting to drive in perfect conditions, and we won't have perfect conditions today. Originally built in 1921 and redeveloped in 1979, Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps plays host to the biggest series and best drivers in the world. Today, the Prodigy Racing Association Elite Series visits to conquer, or be conquered, by this beast of a circuit. Some of the most famous corners await the drivers today: Eau Rouge and Radillon, Les Combes, Pouillon, the bus stop, and many, many more. 30 laps today, and rain is on the way. Drivers have access to 4 tire compounds: hard and soft slicks for dry weather running, and intermediates and wets for when the waterworks arrive. Expect some strategy deviation tonight. The long laps of Spa can reward or punish taking risks with tires. The pit lane is closed under caution, so only green flag pit stops are allowed. This is the 24-hour layout, so look to spend more than 1 full minute in pit lane. These are the fastest Gran Turismo racers in Prodigy Racing Association, and they represent 3 different manufacturers in Chevy, Toyota, and Ford, and something has gone horribly wrong. Never what you want to see for a formation lap. However, it is much less of a big deal in a video game than if that were to happen in real life. A lot less overall damage to the car. So we'll reform the lobby to account for some very, very jumpy internet there. And we'll be reset and ready to go shortly. The normal build-up for a race, you would think, is suspenseful enough, and we're getting an additional one today, so how lucky are we on our Thursday night to have this treat in the run-up to the Elite Series. This is the second to last race for this season in the Elite Series. There will be one more. The Sportsman Series will be racing in Tsukuba. Will be racing 100 laps at Northern Isle Speedway next week. While the Challenger and Elite Series both go to Grand Valley Highway for 25 and 35 laps to round out the season. In running the 24-hour layout at Spa with the massive amount of time that you spend in pit lane, you're looking to make back whatever you can. And on your pit exit, it is a tricky little pit exit. It's fine in the dry, but in the wet, as you head uphill into it, you do have to make a fairly sharpish right to not go across the pit line and incur yourself a penalty that is definitely unneeded when racing drivers of this caliber. You want to hug the wall close to the right, and then it feeds you back out onto the Kemmel Straight. Something to watch out for there, because a little bit overexcitement on the throttle to get back into the racing action in the wet could potentially lead to some time loss due to penalties. And it's never a bad thing to spend a little time going around a track with JSM Turismo as we wait for the grid to be reformed for this race. A second place last week, a very strong podium finish for JSM Turismo, and he starts second today just behind Hoodcat, who he finished behind last week at Watkins Glen. So I really do think that when the race gets started, we will see some pretty good battles popping up all around the circuit. Spa is great for battles, honestly. Well, it's possible to check out if the person chasing you makes one or two mistakes in the wrong areas. It is conducive to battles. The long straights mean that if you can stay within kind of that 1 second area, you can pick up a slipstream. You generally will avoid doing that as much as possible. But now it's on purpose. And the grid has been reformed. So it'll be a formation lap. And then as we return, not to this straight, but to the true start-finish straight, just after the bus stop chicane and before La Source, that is where the race will be called green. So the drivers will go around at about 60-ish, 70 miles an hour on this formation lap as they get set for the 2x2 race start. There's much less jumping around here, so I think we should be all set for a much smoother and ultimately less damaging formation lap. In third place, AY just today was announced to be joining Team Cap'n for the remainder of this season and next season to drive the number 19 Camry. And so congratulations to AY on securing that seat, and that means that Frylock will become a free agent on mutual terms with Team Cap'n. So for the drivers, knowing that there is weather forecasted to be on the way, they will be keeping a close eye down there at the bottom right hand of the screen. In that layout, they are able to call up a variety of different information, including what fuel mode they're in, the number of laps that they have left on that fuel. They'll be able to call up their sector times. They'll be able to call up, critically, the weather radar, and that will play a massive role tonight. It can't be overstated how impactful making the right tire decisions are on a circuit this large. You start a lap in the wrong conditions, you are going to be hung out for a long time as you work around a 7-kilometer circuit to get back to the pits and to get onto the right tire, and that's a great way to lose a huge chunk of time. But whenever there's risk, there is reward, and if you're able to make a tire work for another full lap or 2 more laps, the amount of time that you can pick up by avoiding time in the pit is sometimes worth the gamble. As we head through Blanchimont down into the bus stop, we are just about ready to go green here for 30 laps at Spa. They'll round the corner, filter out, catch up, retighten the field to go 2x2 down into La Source. And we are green, 30 laps at Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. AY moves out to the left, looks for a move around the outside. It would be Brave, he backs out of it, and it's going to be Hoodcat who holds on to the lead going into turn 1. And now coming out of turn 1 as we hammer down to Eau Rouge and Radillon. This will be genuinely fascinating to see if they go too wide up through this sequence of corners. And they do. Oh, that's incredible driving. JSM Turismo drops back 2 positions at the start now. Having a look up the inside of AY going into Les Combes. There's a battle up front as KTB Killer has made up several positions and is now battling Hoodcat for the lead. There's a little bit of contact there between JSM Turismo and AY, but no one's worse for the wear. Now they head down into the tricky downhill braking zone at Rivage. This is the battle to watch. Three people fighting for 5th. Contact there as King Saturn goes off, and he'll lose a couple positions there. M. Schwartz goes through. This is Jackie Ix, the left-hander, as they hammer down into Pouillon. JSM has a half a second penalty that he'll have to clear, but he's gotten back in front of AY. Now sets about trying to open up whatever gap he can before running into that penalty on the back straight. Hoodcat holding off KTB Killer as well for now. All the drivers will be on racing softs to start this race before the weather sets in. Uncle Bobby, a little bit of drift from the field here, looking to defend from Siraxu. Looks like there may have been some contact there. They're tiptoeing around each other, trying to give the space. But back up to the front of the field, JSM Turismo takes that penalty. He'll drop back from the 2 drivers in front of him. KTB takes the lead as we head into the very fast Blanchimont. JSM Turismo gives plenty of space for M. Schwartz to come around the outside. He had lost all the momentum because of that half-second penalty. And we go into the bus stop. Hoodcat picks up a half-second penalty. AY throws it in. It might be a little ill-advised. I think he got out of the throttle, knew that, and gave the position back to JSM Turismo. He got shunted off the road a little bit there. Now KTB Killer looks to check out from the field. M. Schwartz and Hoodcat now looking to go side by side, potentially into Eau Rouge and Radillon. So the field is now smoothed out a little bit. There's a potential battle back for 7th. The field has remained kind of cut up into these sectors. KTB Killer disappearing up the road as Hoodcat and M. Schwartz do battle behind. But all of this to say that whatever gaps you build in a race that you expect to be affected heavily by rain, it does sometimes just go right out the door because of how difficult the driving becomes as you try to do lap after lap in inclement conditions. And 2, 3, 4 second gaps have a way of disappearing if one braking point is missed by just a couple meters. So it's the 8 to 9 gap where it looks like there's one of the larger gaps on the track, and it's only going to grow as Siraxu picks up a half-second penalty there. That corner in the rundown, the corner previous to the rundown to Puyon, it's known by two names, Speaker's Corner and Jackie X, and it's very, very easy in that left-hander to drift wide and run afoul of track limits as your right side of the car just kind of keeps drifting towards the wall that's there, and that's where Siraxu picked up that half-second penalty. And down behind him, a close battle for 10th, but everyone else, Diff ends up in the wall, will be further adrift of the field, but the battles are still raging up in the top half of the field. As Vinny Vinegar's, the Daytona winner, looks to potentially send one down the inside. Could there be another send down the inside? Oh, that is a little bit missing the apex there, and Vinny hands that spot back right away and will lose a spot, the 7th position, to I Am Lost, the Canadian, as they run down to turn 1. The front of the field has now spread out. KTB Killer, a good gap over M. Schwartz, a little bit tighter there between the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th cars. AY finds himself adrift of everyone, a little bit behind JSM Turismo and about the same distance ahead of King Saturn, who has problems mounting behind him. Vinny Vinegars and I Am Lost heading right next to each other down the Kemmel Straight. This is the view we're going to want to watch this battle from. Who can be last on the brakes? You'll pick your braking point right there at the start of those curbs. Vinny Vinegars sticks it very nicely through the inside, keeps the momentum up, but the problems aren't over. I Am Lost will now come back as they head down to Ravage. Vinny Vinegars could have a move there, but nothing doing. Tucks in right behind King Saturn. Now into Jackie X. It's that tricky left-hander where we saw Siraxu pick up that penalty. These three do a fantastic job of keeping it within track limits. And then down to Puyon, picking that braking point. He's always a little bit tricky, but it looked like King Saturn, did get some grass on those inside, on those left tires. But it was Vinny Vinegars who lost a lot of momentum there from Puyon, and through goes the Canadian I Am Lost to now challenge King Saturn for 6th. There's a lot of jockeying for these positions. Everyone, ultimately at this point, 4 laps into the race, become a little bit desperate to just establish rhythm. Spa's a rhythm circuit where it's absolutely critical to settle into how you want to drive your race, how you want to attack your corners, and spend as little time fighting over the course of a long race, especially at the beginning of it, as you can. Focus on the lap times, especially when there's dry running and before the variable of weather gets introduced. But I Am Lost does a fantastic job through Blanchimont down into the bus stop. Who will be last on the brakes? King Saturn tucks to the inside. I Am Lost gets a bump from Vinny Vinegars. It goes off the track, and there's just some, this is a hard track, but the racing is a little bit scrappy here tonight. It's a lot of drivers really trying to settle in, and it is very difficult in the opening stages of a race to really focus in corner after corner on a track that you may know very well. But so long as you're battling someone, you just never are able to get comfortable. Your heart rate stays up, your tires stay very hot, and just the overall stress level ends up in a place that you don't want it. And here JSM Turismo looks for a move on the inside. We'll see if M. Schwartz tries to hang it around the outside. Spot your braking point there just before the last bollard. M. Schwartz does not fight it. JSM Turismo goes through very nicely as we head down into Malmedy. JSM Turismo will now look to pick up a little bit of a gap headed into Ravage, the corner that lasts forever. You'll get back on the throttle as much as possible as you come around that exit. Before you even see the exit of the corner, you'll be picking up the throttle and then not running afoul of track limits there. And now this is the sort of space where if you're able to get maybe up to a second if you can get clear of the car behind. For JSM Turismo, that's M. Schwartz. You can start to focus on your race a little more, keeping the tires in the window that you want them, spotting all your braking points, always staying on the optimal racing line, and just focus on the lap times. Because what's going to come in that sky looks... there is more haze in that sky than there was when we started the race, which means that the wet stuff is on the way. So we'll work through the field here to see what other battles are going on. The 6, 7, 8, pretty much every race that we go to, and a 9 here with Soraxu getting interested, we see the midfield running very tightly together for large sections of the race. It's really fantastic to see. It speaks to a very nice distribution of speed, distribution of pace for the drivers in the Prodigy Racing Association. Though I don't think we'll see any moves here, certainly not any advisable moves into the bus stop on lap 5. But within 6/10 of the car in front, so this is Hoodcat back in the lead after KTB Killer had spent a couple laps in the lead to start the race, just after the start of the race. The sky is definitely graying over now. And these are the parts of the race where you want to get the best possible rhythm established, because however many more laps that you get on dry tires, on soft tires, you can see the tire wear in the bottom left-hand corner. It is not significant at this stage. The cars are still running very well within those operating parameters, and I think a lot of these drivers will ultimately have to come off of these tires long before the performance drops from them. It's AY. Whoa, that's a fantastic save that we caught following AY in the 19 Camry. There are several curbs around Spa that are raised, and to catch them is to introduce quite a bit of risk into your life that you would rather do without. As here we come a battle headed down into Puyan. Would it go up the inside for I Am Lost? Chooses against it. Probably smart around the outside. That it's AstroTurf that you saw just there catch the right tires of I Am Lost, and there are times when you can just get away with it and it doesn't unsettle the car, but as you saw there, that back end wiggle lost the traction going across that turf for just a moment, and that cost him a couple tenths there in this battle with King Saturn. Back up at the front, we are fairly spaced out, with everyone running pretty much over a second away from the car in front or behind them. But now I Am Lost has a run all the way down the back straight. This will be through Blanchimont. Picking the turn in is tricky. These cars aren't super sensitive to aero wash, but you still have to deal with it. King Saturn goes defensive, parks the car in the middle of the road. Absolutely kills the momentum there of both him and I Am Lost. That may have been contact. And there you saw him as well get squirrely a little bit on that turf to the outside of the track and loses a couple positions there as Vinny Vinegars and Soraxu both get by him. And now it's about repairing the damage. Your time is limited on these soft tires, on good tires. You'll want to get the best lap time that you can for what looks like it's clouding over quickly now. Back here in 10th, we have a battle for 10th between Captain Napkins and Millie X2, and Millie is going to look down the inside, be last on the brakes, just about made it work, but if you can hang it around the outside as Captain Napkins did there, you set yourself up on the inside of the second corner of the Lacombe corner sequence. It makes it much easier to retain that position as you head down here into Ravage. They do have the half-second penalty there, so should Millie keep this gap at what it is. They will take that position, but defending extremely well by Captain Napkins to hold that off for as long as possible. And there we saw something very interesting between Vinnie Vinegars and King Saturn. Pouillon is a very tough corner to do any battling on. It's a tough corner when you're alone doing time trials, but in a battle, it's so easy for there to be contact. If anything goes off, any braking points are off by a meter, it's very easy to cause a much bigger amount, a much larger amount of contact than you saw there. Ultimately, a good save by the drivers involved. This gap is stabilized here at just under a second between Hoodcat and KTB Killer for the lead. It doesn't look like the rain is falling just yet. I don't believe that's a slick surface. And the water meter by the tire meter, if you want to watch during the race, there is a surface water meter just to the left of where you see those 4 tire meters in the bottom left-hand corner. And as that fills up with a white bar, it'll kind of indicate the amount of surface water buildup on the track and give some indication as to what tires you'll want to be on. Though it's not an exact science, but it is incredibly dark now. Top of the field spread out, it looks like all the battles are taking a break here, except for the battle for 9th. King Saturn and Millie X2. Oh, this should be very interesting headed into Lake Home. King Saturn edging ahead just a little bit, but backs out of the corner, does not go up the inside. There's a saying in racing, wherever you're looking is where you go, and in that one it seemed like King Saturn was a little bit concerned about the driver behind him, didn't go for the overtake on Millie X2 and left himself open to attack from Captain Napkins, and that looks like that may be a track limits penalty as well, as things go from not great to a little bit even less great for King Saturn, down 11th now, having ceded that position to Captain Napkins. And here Vinnie Vinegar headed into Le Fagna at the back half of the circuit. This is a tricky sequence of corners here where adhering to the racing line is really the best thing you can do, even if it means driving a little bit away from the limit. You just don't want to get out of shape for one of the next corners. And that's a very nice pass there. As it looked like I Am Lost was maybe looking to defend the inside there at Campus Corner, but gets back in front through Stavelot, and now on the run down to Blanchimont. And there is, you can see that white bar now down by those tire meters. There is some surface water now, which means that as it stays in that lower third, everyone will stay on softs. It's still soft tire running. But once it clears that first third, people could get interested in the inners, and certainly above in that very topmost third, you would look at potentially moving to wets. As Vinnie Vinegars goes into turn 1, retains the position just about, but I Am Lost is going to have a very nice run here toward Vinnie Vinegars as they head down the straight into Eau Rouge and Radillon. Eau Rouge here, 35 meters of elevation through Radillon. Just about made that work. The curves will grease up quite a bit as rain continues to fall, and when you can take quite a lot of curb in the dry, you can take virtually none at several parts throughout the circuit as soon as enough water falls. This is heating up to be a very nice battle here for 7th. There's one more with these cars going through Ravage, and the battle for 3rd between JSM, AY, and M. Schwartz. These three have handed several positions back and forth over the start to the race. just approaching 1/3 race distance, and well, the top two Hoodcat and KTB killers. AY goes wide there. I think the grip is going to start going away. Could well be soft tire running still. And yes, we have seen the first two drivers move off of their softs. They were a bit afield from the rest of the drivers, so I wonder if that's not a little bit of a gamble, knowing that drivers may get a little bit more joy out of these slicks, but when you're cut apart from the field, oftentimes you will just have to try new things to try to get back in the fight. But we'll have to see what decision is made here by Hoodcat as we head in here. Does he make for the pits? He does. And behind him, so does KTB Killer. And I think everyone is going to be coming in now. I would expect, with heavier rain looking like it's on the way, that most of these cars will be putting on the wets. You saw AY have quite the big moment there, just trying to get into the pits. It's an awful pit lane to try to get into. An already slow corner, you basically have to stop the car almost to get it turned and inside that cone so you don't pick up a penalty as you enter the pit lane. But the ones to watch here, so it looked like King Saturn and Diff both put on the wets. Yep, that's what we were guessing. And we'll see what the top drivers elect to put on. My guess is that it's going to be wets in these conditions. Wets will operate fine in intermediate conditions, or kind of in that middle part of the wet weather meter. They'll be slower than inners would be, but you don't want to have to make another pit to move from inners to wets if you were to put those intermediates on. This is an unbelievably long amount of time to be in the pits. It's well north of a minute when you, when you factor in fueling time and getting up out of the pits here, up to this hill, which you can see stretching out before you. It is lashing down now for these drivers. You lose so much time in the pits, you want to spend as little time in there as possible, and whatever it takes to do that, that's exactly what you have to do. And now we'll see here, as Hoodcat is fed back out, what the gap is exactly to KTB Killer behind him. I don't see KTB Killer just now getting out onto the Kemmel Straight. Oh, and slides. Oh, it's disaster. A disaster for KTB Killer, and makes impact with the wall. He could very well lose, will lose third. Oh no, and contact as well with Vinny Vinegars, who himself loses control of the car as a result. Oh, it's absolute disaster for KTB Killer, who led parts of this race and was set to come out in second before making that mistake. What I can only expect was too much throttle, and that has completely released Hoodcat now with a 20-second gap in front of JSM Turismo. My only suspicion as to why Hoodcat got out with quite that gap would be perhaps that they took on less fuel and are looking to just save fuel now for a period of time as JSM Turismo loses control. Oh no! It's all come undone for several of these drivers. I mean, these conditions are just absolutely awful, and this is what we talked about. We talked about how difficult it is to drive in these conditions, but also it introduces a level of peril that makes it, virtually possible for anyone to win. I mean, this is a huge equalizer. Hoodcat, notwithstanding, is so far driving extremely consistently, but everyone else is going to be licking their lips, because if the person in front makes a mistake, it could spell the end of one race, it could spell the end of 2 races or 3 races, or potentially it's not going to matter, because we have so much time to spend in what are horrible conditions. As the Best Buy number 17 of Saraxu gets squirrely on the exit, everyone just trying to calm it down a little bit and make these tires work. I believe AY is on intermediates, which will function, you know, worse than the wets in these sorts of conditions. And that's where you see a little bit of that problem. The amount of traction that you lose, you need every single solitary % of traction that your tires can give you in these conditions. And it is just so difficult to make this work if you're not on, you know, the exact right tire. But if you can make those inners work, as you move through a wet period, should it become a more intermediate amount of surface water on the track, you stand to gain. This is all risk and reward. It's all trade-offs at this stage. As everyone, looks like there was another off there, but we can't take our eyes off this battle as we approach Eau Rouge. We'll go on board with AY so we get a view of the 3rd and 4th place runners as they try to make this work. And that was a lot of curb from I Am Lost. You can see he's still sliding that back end around there. He is on wets, AY on intermediates. It's just so difficult to get the traction down and keep good traction. And you see I Am Lost and Siraxu pulling away just a little bit on those wets. I Am Lost has a little look at the inside. Everyone's giving each other space. AY is quite a bit of corner to take. Gets away with it. I Am Lost goes fully sideways. This is barely road racing. This is Tokyo Drift. And somehow AY makes it work. Despite sliding, you just translate the entire car across the track, and he managed to maintain control. This is very, very difficult. These conditions are brutal for these drivers to be dealing with. You can see just on the racing line, that rain meter in the bottom left-hand corner is just under the upper 3rd line. And you'll see this dynamic play out as JSM Turismo in 7th. Drifts a little bit wide, loses a bit of momentum there behind Vinny Vinegars, but the dynamic that begins to play out is that these wet tires especially can evacuate a great deal of water off of the racing line. And so the racing line can at times be, as JSM Turismo finds his way into the gravel, what threat is there behind? Nothing particularly close. He'll lose a little bit of that cushion to Captain Napkins, but no position under threat as of yet. But as I was saying, as these tires evacuate water off of the racing line, you'll have it develop where you can be in intermediate conditions if you're on the racing line, and wet conditions as soon as you move off of it. And you can just tick that down one more, which is that when it becomes a dry racing line, you can be on slicks and you'll be safe on slicks, but you cannot move off of the racing line, especially on slicks. It is difficult enough to make inners work when you're in wet track conditions and you're off the racing line. You're begging for massive problems if you do that with slicks. And so that's the one where even when you have soft tires on, your lap times are not going to be too competitive for a little while, just because you have to tiptoe and make sure that you're on that racing line and that you're on it consistently. Let's look around the field here. Hoodcat with a 23-second lead now. What was 19 seconds ahead of JSM Turismo has seen JSM Turismo drop back to 7th, and the gap open up now to M. Schwartz at 23 seconds. M. Schwartz himself has a half-second penalty, which, depending on how the run down to that back straight goes, where the penalty will be taken out, we could have ourselves quite the battle here. And I think regardless, there is going to be a battle here for the podium positions, at least in this part of the race, as I Am Lost looks to get up close to the rear end of Siraxu. Oh, the stress is just... for a spectator, for a commentator, it's quite enough. It's so much worse to drive in these conditions. Vinny Vinegars in 6th, JSM Turismo about 5 seconds back down the road in 7th, but 4 seconds ahead of Millie X2 in 8th. Captain Napkins getting closer as Millie X2 goes goes a little bit wide there and just tiptoe around Ravage on half throttle. 6 seconds back is Canadian Gypsy in 10th. Another 2.5 seconds back, King Saturn in 11th. Uncle Bobby looking to get close to King Saturn. 12th, Diff, well back, 13th. And KTB Killer, who really was running a very strong opening part of the race, has just seen it all somewhat come apart for him. 3 minutes back from the lead. That's a real shame because in dry weather conditions, KTB Killer was looking very competitive. Certainly for a podium spot, potentially for a win. So now this is that possibility we predicted with M. Schwartz taking that penalty, leaves him under threat to Saraxu. Saraxu will get through well ahead of Blanchiment. I Am Lost is going to be approaching with quite a bit of speed and a nice little slide there. I wouldn't expect M. Schwartz to do anything but tuck in behind Saraxu here and live to fight again. I Am Lost overshoots the braking point. Goes in very deep to the corner, but just about made that work. That's a little bit of a mistake that turned into a bit of tidy driving there from I Am Lost. The leader has fundamentally checked out of the race, but the battles back here are looking honestly very delicious, as everyone is going to be battling basically from second down to a little bit of a gap there between fourth and fifth, but the 2, 3, 4 spot to round out the last 2 spots on the podium has all the makings of a very interesting war to play out here over the next 17 laps. As I Am Lost will have a look, expect up the inside here of M. Schwartz, who's going to be last on the brakes in conditions this bad. It is I Am Lost who controls the car very nicely into Les Combes. The second corner, the corner sequence, it almost throws away the overtake. Tries to get the power down again. That's wheel spin that makes that rear end lose traction and slide a little bit like that, but just about makes that work. It's a 0.5 ahead of M. Schwartz. Full power slide into Ravage. Just has gotten away with it for now as we head into Jackie X. Getting tight to Saraxu here in second. This is really the battle to watch, I think. Although there are little clusters throughout of cars looking for their own fights. But it's I Am Lost and Saraxu battling for second here. And I Am Lost last on the brakes. Very, very nicely done by Saraxu to not go into the back of I Am Lost as they head into that corner. This is into Campus. Saraxu again, just tight and tucking up behind I Am Lost. Both of these drivers on the wets, with M. Schwartz on the wets as well, looking to pick up the pieces for any significant mistake that the two in front of him make. So the run down, this is to Blanchiment. Between the Canadian I Am Lost, who goes, catches a puddle on the inside and somehow makes that work. He'll give that position up fairly easily. Happy, I think, just to stay on the track there. That's an insanely skillful bit of driving to keep that car on the road. And all of the cars, Saraxu goes a little bit deep, but especially in that bus stop chicane, it's just so difficult to make any move stick in the best of times, but it's hard to get the traction down on the exit as you come across the start-finish line. And even in the wet, it makes everything about 100 times harder. It's JSM Turismo in the background there is going to look for a move, potentially into La Source, backs out of it. AY goes a little bit deep, and that's going to hand JSM Turismo the position. AY gave that one away a little bit to JSM Turismo, but he's going to have a run here if he wants it, and can find the grip here as we go through Eau Rouge and up the elevator that is Radion onto the Camel Straight. Looks like he just about is making that work. No problems with track limits there, and he is going to have a run on JSM Turismo as we head down the Camel Straight into Le Camp. Oh, these are just breathless laps here. So much happening in these conditions. AY gets the brakes on and just about makes that work. Still behind JSM Turismo, but now they're catching up to Vinny Vinegars in 5th. Knowing how much to push your car is incredibly difficult, because if the person behind you is able to extract a 10th per corner around here, if that's all it is, they can take out almost 2 seconds per lap on you. And those are the margins that we're talking about. With 19 corners, extracting just a 10th out of your car, or someone is just managing to extract an extra 10th as we go through these corners, leads to an entirely different amount of pace that they're able to put down over the course of one lap here at Spa. I think I saw a wiggle up here in this. No, that was a lapped car there. I believe that's KTB Killer back there struggling a little bit. I think we'll see them shortly as this battle reaches them. I am lost still, just tucked in behind Saraxu, about half a second back. That one's been holding for a little while. The puddles that you see forming on the track play a very big role in how your car behaves, which may seem like an obvious thing, but essentially what it feels like is if you pass a puddle here as I Am Lost goes down the inside looking for a potential move, this is responsible from everyone. Just backs out of it. Potentially could have the traction. No, and you saw right there hit the puddle on the right hand side on that curb, that red and yellow curb. When you hit a puddle, it essentially feels like it does in a car that you're used to driving around as KTB Killer goes on there. And it feels like driving through, I suppose, quicksand, but with a big tug of the wheel towards it. So it feels like you're about to spin, and hitting one of those hitting one of those puddles can often lead to a spin, as I Am Lost barely hangs onto it up Radion. It's almost the correction that in some cases is worse than hitting the puddle itself. You'll snap the wheel back over to try to keep that traction in your front tires, and you end up just sliding. You can spin that way as well as you unbalance the car, and it just becomes a whole mess. I mean, the way that the puddles at Spa form, you can see them just on the edges of the track. They land on those curves, and especially right there on the left side of the screen. It is incredibly stressful, and why in general you'll see a lot of these drivers just stay off the curbs entirely and say there's time to be found there, but it's disaster if there's a mistake made. And so perhaps you give back that 10th per corner, while always keeping an eye on the people around you and the sort of times that they're able to get out of the lap here. And now Saraxu loses momentum there going into Pouillon. I Am Lost, if he can get the traction down as we move through the second part of Pouillon and then down into Lafagna. He does get that move done, but Saraxu is going to be coming back at him. Take this left, the second corner in the Lafagna corner sequence, and head down to Campus Corner. For this right-hander becomes another right-hander at Stavlo. Now that gap is opened up to about half a second, but we'll have to see if Saraxu gets a run. Headed down through Blanchimont to the bus stop. Oh, and Siraxu, there must have been a moment there for Siraxu. He's fallen adrift now. He had been battling I Am Lost for second and now finds himself in sixth. And it just goes to show you, GT7 Turismo has had quite the race so far. Started in second, had a difficult opening lap, and then ended up down in seventh after a little bit of struggles with the weather, and now back in a podium position. It just goes to show the rain, the weather around a circuit like this it can ruin your race in a second, and it can save your race in another. As we work down the field now, I Am Lost has been released to run as freely as you can in these sorts of conditions. GT7 Turismo 5 seconds back. Closest behind him is Vinny Vinegar's about another second back. AY 3 seconds back on the road. Siraxu another 3 seconds back. M. Schwartz, who had been battling higher up the field, now 2 seconds adrift of Siraxu, but 10 seconds clear of Millie X2, who's 1 second ahead of Captain Napkins. That gap looking to hold steady and be gaining a little bit as Captain Napkins actually takes a position off of Millie X2. Must have had a little bit of a moment coming up. Radion, I think I spotted KGB Killer with another spin. Hoodcat is having one of the loneliest races that he'll have in his Prodigy Racing Association career. 26 seconds ahead of I Am Lost, and that gap has been holding pretty steady. If we watch that rain meter, the bottom left-hand corner, we're still in wet conditions. Now even on the racing line, we're in wet conditions. So AY, I think, was an intermediate runner. Captain Napkins on inners. It looks like KGB Killer's on racing softs. That's the reason. That car needs to go in the pits. A very hot battle here for 8th now. 8th, 9th, 10th. 3 spots here between Millie X2 Gypsy and Captain Napkins up for grabs. Whatever sort of battles exist that can be raced well in dry conditions are an entirely different thing when you're running in the wet. Siraxu has a gap both in front and behind. AY making these intermediates work and running 5th. So as the track dries, as the racing line dries, and ultimately the track dries, the race is gonna come to AY. So long as he can hold on to it in the conditions that aren't perfectly suited to his tires, which is those wet conditions where we find ourselves. Look at that consistency, though. Lap 12 to lap 15 just throws down 3 minutes flat. A 3-minute 7, a 3-minute 5, a 3-minute 9, and then goes down to the 2:59 mark on the last lap, on lap 16. If we compare that to the other drivers around, you're seeing pretty similar ones. A little bit quicker there for Vinny Vinegar's, dipping a little bit further below the 3-minute mark more often. Up here, GT7 Turismo now pumping in very nice laps. He's come to grips extremely well with these conditions. Some 256s, 258s in there. If we were to look at Hoodcat, what do these times look like? So, say GT7 Turismo, while not is currently the fastest man on track, even though Hoodcat holds that fastest lap from when we were soft tire running. That gap there has kind of stayed about 27 seconds to I Am Lost. So over these last couple laps, Hoodcat and I Am Lost have put in pretty similar lap times, both on the wet tires. GT7 Turismo is going to be trying to reduce that as much as possible to I Am Lost. Vinegars on the intermediates. And Siraxu's back up to 5th here. I'm not sure if that was a nudge wide or just took that a little bit wide as we run down into Puyon. Now the race is in some ways stabilized just a little bit. Not huge gaps between a lot of cars, but I think kind of a overall understanding that if you're going to push your car, if you're going to engage in a battle with a car, it is introducing such a huge amount of risk into your race. And if you're similar enough on pace, maybe you are able to just tuck into the slipstream, do some fuel saving in these conditions where you're spending plenty of time off the throttle anyway, and then, you know, you can save that time in the pits later on. This could be the battle here as we head through Blanchiment and down into the bus stop. Siraxu has better traction, has the run on AY. AY does commit to defend down the inside. Everyone's very tentative on those brakes. You have to be with the amount that you can slide, especially at a corner like that. Siraxu's tucked up very tightly behind AY. We run down over the finish line. Complete the 17th lap. AY goes defensive here, now defending the positions into La Source. We saw AY drift wide earlier, no such mistake this time. Now it's just all about traction, getting the rubber meeting the road as you head down this straight into Eau Rouge and Radillon and up to the Kemmel Straight. Just doesn't look like the rain has relented at all, but if Siraxu is on the racing line, it is just, oh, Vinny Vinegars had a moment there. He'll drop back a few positions there. Past Siraxu. Siraxu has a massive run on AY. This might get the move done well before the braking zone. AY goes in, braking aggressively. It does try to hang around the outside and somehow made that work. I'm not sure if AY kept all 4 tires on the track there, but you can just see that car just absolutely complaining as he tries to get the traction down and the run down to Rivage. And now Siraxu, oh, AY may have overcooked that just a little bit. This is very nice racing, contact-free racing. The Siraxu again behind AY. Will it be a move into Puyon? AY crowds Siraxu a little bit. Siraxu's through. Into Puyon they go. Siraxu backs out of it a little bit. AY hanging onto it almost sideways on the curb. Still almost sideways. And gets out of it as we now head into Le Fagnes. Oh, this is the wet weather racing that you really do love to see. Siraxu looks to just keep the pressure on, look for some sort of mistake, but somehow AY is getting these inners to work. He's getting just enough out of it. Siraxu, to his credit, is attacking extremely respectfully, but will want to get this move done. As you could say, there's a tire advantage in these conditions. Siraxu is on the right tire, I think, and AY is just about on the wrong one for how on the limit we are. And we can see the difference in the car posture from Siraxu. It just isn't squirming around quite as much as AY, but AY is just still making this work. We head through Blanchiment. If Siraxu can keep up the momentum here and get the move done, AY goes defensive into the bus stop. Siraxu is going to want to get through this corner as clean as possible and get traction to try to make that be the difference between him and AY coming out of the bus stop. Might have been a little bit of contact there, or that was AY just getting a little bit loose with the rear end as he tried to get the power down. But it's Siraxu up into 4th. AY will have to go around the outside to retain the position here, or look for the switcheroo and somehow get the traction down, and does get the traction down just about. Oh, it's sensational driving from AY. There will be no side-by-side up through Eau Rouge and Radion. You can make it work. These track conditions. Oh, that's a big slide. 2 big slides. Goes a little bit wide. That could just about be a penalty if that front left strayed a little bit, and it is. Oh, an unfortunate end to the battle, for now at least, between AY and Siraxu. That was breathless stuff for a few laps. And behind AY has bigger problems as Vinny Vinegars has arrived on the scene, and M. Schwartz. Vinny Vinegars on intermediates. Now that's going to be a tire match for AY. They'll both be on inners, and it looks just about like we are moving to intermediate conditions, so I would expect the cars on inners to start pulling a little bit more speed than they have been capable of around the circuit. But the differential to the wet weather runners, or to the wet tire runners, we're going to have to keep an eye on here, and we'll see it play out in this battle because it's Siraxu on wets, AY on inners as a half-second penalty to clear on the run down to Blanchimont. Vinny Vinegar also on inners, and behind them, M. Schwartz on wets. And so we have the 2 intermediate runners bookended by 2 wet tire runners. So we get a very nice view of the track conditions and the evolution of this stage of the race. And you can see even this dry line starting to form, those dark that dark line. You can see that's the racing line, and the lighter gray off to the side, that's more additional surface water. And so you'll want to stick as tightly as you can to this drier line as long as it's in these conditions. AY clears that penalty. Will lose 2 spots, 1 to Vinny Vinegars, 1 to M. Schwartz. We'll have to look to get back on rhythm here through Blanchimont. This group has spaced out a little bit. AY has a little sniff there at the inside. Thought maybe it was possible interbraking, but elected against it. As the track continues to dry, the wet weather runners will be the first to experience the issues with cooling their tires. Any wet weather tire, but especially the wet tire, is going to be impacted more by overheating than the inners, and if you were to put on a soft tire as soon as that becomes vaguely possible. And so you'll see drivers start to dip their tires into the wet spots on the track, which you would think everyone would just want to stay where it's dry all the time, but as this continues to dry out, as they lap KTB Killer, you do want to control those temperatures. In this battle here now between Vinny Vinegars and Siraxu, Siraxu moves back out to take the racing line. Vinny Vinegars looking up the inside, both tentative on the brakes, but oh, that's good driving. That's a good overtake, and Siraxu is going to look to try to come back. But now are we starting to see the intermediates have their day? We're certainly in intermediate conditions so long as you stay on the racing line. And if Vinny Vinegars is able to pull out a gap here to Siraxu, we will get a good look at what the potential lap difference is between a wet tire runner and an intermediate tire runner. The gap between Hoodcat and I Am Lost at the front of the field has remained steady in that 27-28 second ballpark, but JSM Turismo has now closed that gap to I Am Lost. They're both wet weather tire runners. And that is going to be a battle to watch if JSM Turismo can keep taking chunks out of I Am Lost. But they're on similar tires. They'll have similar heating problems so long as they stay on those. But this racing line is getting very dry. Look at the water meter, the surface water meter in the lower left-hand corner. That is just about in dry territory. No one in the pits. Hoodcat not in the pits yet, sticking out on the wets. I would expect maybe one more lap. But right there, that's the sort of disaster that awaits. You cannot go offline. In these conditions, it matters a little less if you have the wet tires on, but there is still there's less grip out there. Once the soft tires go on, that's a mistake that you really can't afford to make. So Vinny Vinegar's on the intermediates has pulled out, a 2-second gap on Siraxu, who's on the wets. AY has gotten back in front of M. Schwartz, AY on the inners, and it looks like that is just about the differential that we might be able to expect. It will show up in the high-speed corners, yes, but also traction coming out of low-speed corners. The intermediate runners are just going to have a little bit of an advantage here over the wet tires. And you can see AY gets a good run. That was 0.8. It's going to be down to 6-ish tenths. Now losing a little bit of time here out of the slipstream as they come into Les Combes. Here we see King Saturn doing what I had mentioned before, just cooling those tires down as much as possible, trying to get them to not overheat. Once they overheat, it feels like you're just driving back in the wet, you're sliding all over the place. It's very difficult to get rear traction in these cars. So every opportunity just about. Here's a battle for 10th. Captain Napkins, a run down to Rivage is always a very stressful thing to try to overtake when you have a dry line and a not dry line, but Gypsy just gets hung out a little bit around the edge, around the corner of Rivage, and loses the position to Captain Napkins, who himself has a little bit of a moment coming out of Jackie X as we head down toward Pouillon. And now AY challenging Siraxu, so that gap closed very quickly between an intermediate and a wet tire. And I have to think, yep. So Hoodcat now into the pits. These are going to be softs for the last 9 laps of this race. And this is one to keep an eye on because adhering to the racing line will be absolutely critical in these conditions as I Am Lost chooses to go out on wets again. JSM Turismo behind him comes in to ditch the wets and put on what I assume are going to be softs. They are going to be softs. I Am Lost is going to be in the lead of this race, but now it is all about putting in a good enough lap that protects the differential to JSM Turismo from when JSM Turismo went into the pits. I Am Lost needs to put in a very strong lap here before ditching these wets to go on to softs. Otherwise, when JSM Turismo gets out of the pits, does his outlap on softs, may well jump I Am Lost. A classic case of a weather-related undercut. Less about tire wear, more about the right tire to be on. So I Am Lost is going to have, 20-second gap. But even here you can see, just watch that time come down. The difference between I Am Lost and AY. AY has the penalty, but this shows you the difference between a wet tire, which I Am Lost is on, and AY has an inner on, and took a full 2 seconds out of I Am Lost's lead all the way down the Kemmel Straight. Captain Napkins on intermediates in third. They'll all have to ditch these wet weather tires. Uncle Bobby on wets. Gypsy still on wets. Hoodcat now on racing softs as we expected. JSM Turismo as well on racing softs. And this strategy to go soft, wet, soft lets you have 2 pit stops. You can be a little bit more flexible on the amount of fuel that you take on in the first pit stop because you know you have the second one to play with. So if there's any fuel strategy there, you're able to work with that. But now coming out against wet tires, Wets and intermediates are all that's ahead of Hoodcat, and he's on softs, and so if he sticks this on the racing line and makes it work, he will be way faster than every other car that's stuck with the inners and stuck with the wets. We can see this here, just you can be so much more confident in your braking zones, makes that one work extremely easily, and will pull away. Just watch this gap open up, 2 tenths there, another tenth, all here on the run down to campus. And so long as you stay, you can see Hoodcat stays well away from the curb there on the left and on the right and on the left again. Just not wanting to take any chances with those racing softs. There will be no grip offline, but there is all the grip that he needs on the racing line. And so the one to watch here, I Am Lost, comes into the pits to ditch the wets. And I have to expect, as JSM Turismo rounds, as JSM Turismo rounds Campus and heads to Stavolo, I would think that JSM Turismo will manage to undercut I Am Lost, unless there was a little bit too much scrappiness in this outlap from JSM Turismo. This is going to be fascinating to see if I Am Lost, how much I Am Lost has to take on in fuel as well. Hoodcat now back to the lead of the race as all the wet tire runners pit. But this is the one we're watching. It's JSM Turismo navigating the bus stop. Stay on the racing line, you absolutely must. And then barrels down over the start-finish line to start lap 23. Head down to La Source. And this is where it's going to be critical. It's JSM Turismo, has jumped. No, hasn't jumped. I Am Lost. Oh, will get out of the pits just ahead of JSM Turismo, and he'll be on softs. Oh, it worked out about as well as you could hope for from I Am Lost, retaining, even I think gaining a second or two. But it's coming down quick. You have so much better of a run if you can get Eau Rouge and Radion to work on softs up the Kemmel Straight, whereas I Am Lost had to come out of the pit and then get back up to racing speed. That could be the battle to watch now. Gypsy will have to pit to get rid of these wets. Hoodcat had a moment as well. Still 30 seconds ahead of the true second place, which is I Am Lost on similar tires. Gypsy, you have to think, is going to come in soon to ditch these wet tires. I Am Lost with a huge mistake, and there goes JSM Turismo, and that I expect that was the problem. That is Pouillon, where it just got away from I Am Lost, got offline, and as I said, you get offline on slicks with these sorts of conditions on the edges of the track, and you'll go one direction, and that's straight on the way you don't want to go. So I Am Lost drops down to 4th. Siraxu now on racing soft, 6 seconds back up the road. Miliax2 just 3 tenths behind Siraxu, and then a gap to M. Schwartz, a large gap to AY. I think that may have been a wreck from Uncle Bobby. We'll see if a caution gets called based on everyone's speeds. It doesn't look like there's a caution out. The caution cutoff is going to be lap 27 in a 30-lap race as King Saturn goes wide and hands 8th place to Captain Napkins. I see these mistakes are starting to creep in a little bit. Diff parked off the bus stop chicane. It's happening up at the front of the field. Hoodcat has a 5-second lead on Gypsy. Gypsy, I have to think, is going to have to pit, even if not for the tires, but for the fuel. The fuel looks low as well. GT7 Turismo will be able to take large chunks out of that. I just expect Gypsy to come in at some point to ditch those wets. I am Lost looking to get back in rhythm behind JSM Turismo. Nearly X2 in this battle with Siraxu. Looks to be one of our tightest battles on track. Is Siraxu? Oh, a big mistake in the braking zone there. Looked like he caught a little bit of slick curve, and that's why you do try to avoid the curves as much as humanly possible. When the car is loaded in a turn, as you come through one of these corners, as you're in the braking zone, just clipping grass, clipping the curb at all is just so often enough to send you around. It's even spacing out here for first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth now. All fairly large gaps. The closest is that one between Siraxu and M. Schwartz. Just about 2.5 seconds apart, and then it's another 14 seconds back to Captain Napkins in 8th, 5.5 seconds back to King Saturn. There's a 1.5 second advantage over Uncle Bobby. Less than a second advantage over Vinny Vinegars. It looks like just about everyone is on the racing soft. Oh, Uncle Bobby goes off. Puyan has caught out a couple drivers now. Look like he got AY as well. Yep, and Gypsy now from second place will pit, so we'll see where they filter back out into the field. It is just such a demanding track. And to do 30 laps in dry conditions produces a huge amount of stress, but in conditions where you were on soft tires, you went on to inners or you went on to wets, you just had to live with no one had the perfect tires for every lap. Sometimes inners were better in that rain, sometimes the wets were better in that rain, but it just produces such an incredible amount of strain on the drivers. And we've seen fantastic wet weather battling, and I suspect we're going to see some good dry weather battling as well. It looks here at Hoodcat, oh, we are under caution now. Well then. We have a caution out on lap 25, just 2 laps before the cutoff. So we're going to reform the grid. Oh. It was the race that had a little bit of everything, except for one thing. And that was a caution, and now we have it. This sets up a blockbuster end to this race. So Hoodcat leads the field. The drivers will form single file before they get into the 2x2 formation to restart the race. As we come down now through Rivage. It is possible to restart the race on a straight that is not the start-finish straight, but it just depends on when the field is reformed into the correct 2x2 grid and everyone kind of settles into their correct positions. But I just look at the sort of race that we've seen. Look at some of these names. JSM Turismo, this is how they started. Hoodcat on pole, JSM Turismo in second. JSM Turismo down, I think, as low as 7th at one point in true position, right back in second, and we get set to go again. So long as we're in this formation, the single file formation, we will not be set to go green just yet. You can see Hoodcat just pacing the field. So everyone works out behind him. In these moments, you're really just kind of focused as much as you can on driving A to the caution speed, but also you are trying to keep your tires into a good temperature window. With everyone on slicks, there's still wet spots on the track. You're just wanting to avoid those. You want to keep the tires as warm as possible. Hoodcat with a little bit of weaving there just to keep a little bit of heat, and something goes horribly wrong for Vinny Vinegars. For a moment, is first before being relegated back to the appropriate position. Now with JSM Turismo pulling out, it looks like we're forming the 2x2 grid now as we get set to do this again. We will have about 5 laps of racing, assuming we get going on lap 26, or to start lap 26. The caution cutoff is lap 27, so after lap 27 there will be no more cautions. So we fit this one in just ahead of the cutoff point, and it has set us up for a wild finish here potentially. Everyone is going to be thinking that they just about might be able to make this happen as we go green to settle it once and for all at Spa. Hoodcat leads the field down into turn 1. I Am Lost looks up the inside. Can he make it stick? Oh, there's contact back in the field. JSM Turismo disappears from second position. Hoodcat has a 4/10 lead on I Am Lost going up into Eau Rouge and Radion. The field is mostly fine there, but Hoodcat may have gone wide there. That could be a half-second penalty here as we have a battle restart. That is a half-second penalty for Hoodcat. He's passed on the Kemmel Straight by 2 cars. It could be 3. It could be 4 based on the run into Les Combes. Siraxu backs out of it. Oh, and this fighting between the front 3 has reopened the door for Hoodcat to retake 3rd position, put himself back on the podium. And now it's King Saturn, Hoodcat, I Am Lost, all chasing M. Schwartz. AY picks up a penalty, sends it in. Oh, just avoids contact with I Am Lost, but takes 5th position. We'll have to clear a half-second penalty, though. M. Schwartz and King Saturn. Oh, King Saturn right on the trunk of M. Schwartz. As we run down into Pouillon, you have to get this one right. There's still wet track that exists. M. Schwartz looks like he drifts, oh, maybe just a little wide, but hangs on to the position. And now we head to Lafania as King Saturn look to hang it around the outside, both on the brakes. About the same time, M. Schwartz understeers, pushes King Saturn wide, tucks back in behind, but it's let Hoodcat get close. And behind Hoodcat, it's I Am Lost having a look around. AY with a half-second penalty to clear. Siraxu behind him. And then a little bit more of a gap to, I think that's JSM Turismo in 7th. These are critical corners to make this work and establish track position. Try to reform that rhythm. 1 car goes off. Looks like the 7th position car now, Siraxu. I Am Lost gets past Hoodcat now through Blanchimont, but Hoodcat has a run on I Am Lost as we head into the bus stop. Late on the brakes as Hoodcat makes it work up the inside, hangs onto it just about through the bus stop, and reestablishes 3rd position. Oh, and JSM Turismo is relentless, back to 4th. Oh, the battles aren't over yet in the lead. It's King Saturn from M. Schwartz, about a 4/10 gap. This may be the one to watch on this lap. As we head down, completely flat, everyone completely flat. Oh, a little bit of a lift there from M. Schwartz, made it work. And now in the slipstream, down the Kemmel Straight, 4/10 off. King Saturn got a little bit better run, but M. Schwartz in the slipstream. A gap is opened up now to Hoodcat, 1.2 seconds. M. Schwartz just content to sit behind King Saturn, look to get closer through Les Combes and Malmedy. Oh, before heading down to Rivage. Close the gap to 3.5 tenths, 3 tenths, 3 flat under 3/10 into Rivage. A little bit late on the brakes, a little bit of a slide there. Oh, you can't take your eyes off it. M. Schwartz will reload and go again, headed down to Pouillon. Throw the car into the left, load those right tires so heavily, and just stick on the throttle. They'll be complaining all the way down until you straighten that car out. But here into La Fagna, M. Schwartz just looking for any sort of a window that King Saturn might open up. Gets back on the power very well there, but it's fallen adrift, just 6/10 back from King Saturn as Hoodcat has reduced the gap to under a second, and behind them JSM Turismo and Mille X2 battling. And then a large gap behind fifth, back to AY, looking to defend the position, not too close from Vinny Vinegars, who himself has problems in the form of Captain Napkins. This might be a battle back here. It is Gypsy and Saraxu battling for 9th. Might we see a move up the inside from Saraxu? Would have to be late on the brakes. Content to back out of it. We'll return to the front of the race as the battle for the lead heads into the final 3 laps. No more cautions. What we have is what we have. M. Schwartz now falling back into the grip of Hoodcat, as King Saturn will do everything possible to open up whatever gap is possible and hope that M. Schwartz and Hoodcat squabble over second and let him get a little bit further up the road. But that's a fantastic drive through Rouge and Radian by M. Schwartz and Hoodcat. They both got fantastic runs. Will M. Schwartz look to the inside? King Saturn goes defensive. M. Schwartz would have to go around the outside. King Saturn moves back to the racing line. Oh, and M. Schwartz dives down the middle, or dives down the inside. But it's let Hoodcat go through. Through goes Hoodcat. And Hoodcat back to first. Oh, sensational from Hoodcat. Mistakes each from King Saturn and M. Schwartz. Oh, and contact from M. Schwartz as he's now pushing. Nudges King Saturn wide in Rivage. The head down to Jackie X. Everyone trying to just relight the tires, get back on rhythm. And it's King Saturn who's done it best of all, just well under 2/10 to Hoodcat. Into Pouillon, flick the wheel to the left, and just ride those right-hand tires. Those be screaming for mercy for this run down to La Fagna. But where is the move going to come? Is the move going to come? King Saturn goes a little bit deep there, and the gap opens for a moment. Gets the power down nicely as we head down into Campos and Stavolo. Took a lot of curb on the inside there. It compromised the traction just a little bit, and M. Schwartz might be having another look. JSM Turismo, a rather interested party. Back and forth. Oh, I can barely get the words out. Hoodcat looking to defend a 6/10 advantage over King Saturn. King Saturn, it's under 2/10 to M. Schwartz. M. Schwartz could be eyeing up a move as we go through Blanchiment. Little bit of a gap, just enough of a gap, and M. Schwartz out of range for a move on King Saturn. Everyone takes the bus stop chicane just about as tidily as possible, lives to fight another day, and we reset and we do it again. JSM Turismo has now closed it to under half a second. AY looking to defend a position from Captain Napkins, who will have a half-second penalty to clear. AY looks to perform a nice little switcheroo, gets it done very nicely. Oh, that's very clever from AY. Takes a little bit of contact and loses rear traction there for just a minute, but we're back up to the front of the field. JSM Turismo just 2/10 behind M. Schwartz. He's going to have the run on him all the way down the Kemmel Straight. This is going to be the view we want. King Saturn weaving to try to break the toe, ends up going left to the track. M. Schwartz having a little look down the inside, doesn't send it. Tucks back in behind, that could leave him open to JSM Turismo, who captures the inside line, but M. Schwartz has the inside line heading
Oh, into Malmedy as we head down to Rivage. Down to Rivage, JSM Turismo up into a podium position. Whiplash from the number of positions lost and gained today for JSM Turismo. But the problems are not done yet. M. Schwartz behind, Millie X2 just behind him. Hoodcat has done a fantastic job to open up a 2.5 over King Saturn, who's a second ahead of JSM Turismo, who's only 0.3 ahead of M. Schwartz as we head into Puyan. Well, I said before qualifying, can you keep it together over a lap? That was the question. That was the question for qualifying, and it's turned out with that late caution to be the case in the race as well. We're coming down to the final lap. The final lap. AY gets it done on Soraksu. Captain Napkins as well, but has that half-second penalty to clear still. Soraksu will recover that position without a fight. And we head down, hammering down toward Blanchimont, and then into the bus stop to start the last lap of an enthralling 30 laps at Spa. Millie X2 has just fallen back a little bit from the top 4. Hoodcat has increased the lead by just a hair, but the battle here is 2, 3, and 4. Who is going to end up in second and third? Who's going to round out the podium? We're going to find out in just about 2.5 minutes. JSM Turismo looked like he went a little bit wide there. May have compromised an exit, but gets the traction down well. We head toward Eau Rouge and Radeon. Now just a half second again between M. Schwartz and Millie, 4th and 5th. 7 seconds back for AY. An extremely tight battle here. Do they go too wide through Eau Rouge? No, Soraksu backs out. AY takes the position. We may be seeing that again at Le Cam, where currently Hoodcat has opened up a 2.5 second lead. Will be fine on fuel for the final lap. King Saturn, a little bit too much fuel, actually, you could say. JSM Turismo lining up a move here on King Saturn, 0.3 back, headed into Rivage. Picking your braking points, so critical for this corner, but so is getting on the power as we head down to Jackie X in a quick left. Don't run afoul of track limits there. Both drivers do a magnificent job of that. M. Schwartz looking to defend from Millie X2. Down into Puyan. JSM Turismo carrying just a little bit more momentum. Oh, quite a bit more momentum as King Saturn drifts wide. That's going to be on the defensive line as we head into Lefania. JSM Turismo looks to hang it around the outside, set himself up on the inside for the second corner of the Lefania sequence, and he does it. Retakes second position. This is how we started the race. Out of compass, nudged maybe a little wide by King Saturn. Oh, I'm not sure if that was contact. It'd be looked at after the session if it was. King Saturn retakes second and now looks to defend from M. Schwartz. Up ahead of them, Hoodcat looks to take a fantastic victory from a grueling 30 laps at Spa as he heads through Blanchimont and down into the bus stop. It's King Saturn in second, defending by 0.09 the position from M. Schwartz. M. Schwartz would have to make the move, and it would have to come right about now. King Saturn defends very well to the inside, and it's going to be King Saturn who gets the power down. Hoodcat takes the win. Sensational drive from Hoodcat. King Saturn finishes second. M. Schwartz third, just 1/10 back. Millie X2 fourth. JSM Turismo fifth. It'll be AY finishing sixth, a gap back to seventh there for I Am Lost. 8th looks like Captain Napkins. Soraksu in 10th. Soraksu in 9th. Vinny Vinegars in 10th. Uncle Bobby in 11th. Gypsy in 12th. And Diff and KTB Killer having already taken the checkered flag as they had been lapped. Oh, a wonderful, wonderful way to spend 30 laps. Me personally, at least. Congratulations to Hoodcat for that. I hope that you enjoyed that. I know I did. it's getting a little bit difficult for me to get the breath in at this point. That was a sensational, incredible end to 30 laps at Spa. Again, this is the Prodigy Racing Association Elite Series, and we'll see if we can get Hoodcat into the booth to have a quick chat about just what he pulled off tonight. So hang around for that. That should be coming up shortly. So we're not able to get Hoodcat in the booth tonight. Well, it would have been a treat to talk to him about that win, a fantastic win. But regardless, thank you for tuning in. This is the Prodigy Racing Association Elite Series. We will be back next week racing Grand Valley Highway 35 laps. Again, if you haven't yet, like the video, subscribe to the channel, come find Prodigy Racing Association. It's an excellent time, a wonderfully administered league, and we get shows like this, which honestly, how can you argue with a race like that? Thank you so much for tuning in. It has been an absolute pleasure. I'm Boring Peppers, and that is